How can we express something that we can't put into words? Holistic right-brained thinking, creative thinking, visual thinking. This is the language of genius, the language of invention, the language of human progress. Without the original creative insight, literally nothing would be worth doing. It is creative thinking that defines and gives purpose to our day-to-day activities.
For the last 100 years, we've used the industrial narrative. Schools are like factories. It's an administrative process. It's about control and order.
The kids are having a much more stimulating and rich environment outside of schools than they are in school.
Kids are very rich content developers today through their social networking sites. They're big communicators through email, instant messaging, and text messaging, and yet all of those things are banned from their schools.
The average American young person spends more than 6.5 hours in front of some sort of screen each day, surfing the web, watching TV, and playing games.
Okay, when you have a novel.
Yet most schools treat the written word as the only means of communication worthy of study. And as a consequence, students remain poorly equipped to think critically about and express themselves through the media they are immersed in every day.
In traditional schools, we've thought about learning environments as the interaction between a teacher, a student, and curriculum, or the content that that student is supposed to be learning. And in the digital age, the learning environment is completely blown open. Because when you go online, or if you're in a game, or if you're in a social network, you could be interacting with thousands of people, many of whom are your peers. And so peers play a hugely important role in learning environments in the 21st century.
Every state now incorporates aspects of media education in its core curricular framework.
Media literacy, living with media, and there was something else there that I missed.
Visual and verbal.
Visual and verbal message.
At the Greater Brunswick Charter School in New Jersey, media analysis is part of a class project on gender roles.
What's the difference between the male and female images here? We've been looking at movies for the last couple of weeks. Yeah, go ahead.
I guess you can say lighter colors are more feminine. The way they're advertising it there, and darker colors are for men.
But why?
This idea of a longer sustained project that kids get invested in for a period of time, a project that has a lot of different elements to it, jibes really well with a lot of the goals of media literacy, because we want for students to realize that there are all kinds of nodes being pushed, all kinds of different aspects to what they're learning about and what they're addressing when they make media or they think about media.
One thing that we'd like to emphasize is that we're not just talking about keeping kids safe from the bad stuff, the bad content and the bad people on the internet, but we're talking about safety to enable them and to empower them to do the great things online, to access the world's information, to collaborate with kids in Russia or in South America on a school project, to immerse themselves in this digital world, providing, of course, they keep a balance and go out in the real physical world too. So it's safety for a purpose. It's safety to enable them to have the opportunity to form and to create relationships online that are healthy, that are productive, and ultimately will become the foundation for what we call digital citizenship.
I would say that I'm one of those types of people who like to make websites. Well, this is one of the websites I created. It's called iMe. You can upload your own photos. I'm really a big fan of Strawberry Shortcake and Alvin and the Chipmunks.
I'd say being able to experiment with technology is really what makes it technology. If people didn't sit there and experiment with test tubes back in days of Newton, nothing would have happened. It's paving the way for us to move forward as a species and a civilization.
What we do in gaming, coordination and communication is very, very similar to what we do at school. So in the game, we have to talk to each other. We have to coordinate what we're going to do in order to make sure that we do it well.
These days, engaging simulations and games can be found just about anywhere critical thinking happens. Anywhere, that is, except the classroom.
X over 360.
Our schools are in trouble if our response to things like cell phones and new technologies is to ban them, to say, well, you can't bring that into school. And games, I think, are really the cutting edge because they probably more than anything are good at letting people start as novices and become experts.
See? Oh, yeah.
We don't live in an industrial economy anymore. We live in a knowledge economy, and so we have to think about education in a fundamentally different way. We can't be focusing on basic facts and basic skills. We have to think about ways of thinking that are going to matter more than what we do in traditional schools right now.
On the Wii, you can do some of that.
Kurt Squire and David Williamson Schaefer research educational games at the University of Wisconsin. In one study, Squire gauged the impact of the game Civilization on a group of 4th, 5th, and 6th graders.
A lot of the kids come in hating school, and in particular really hating social studies. And we start them off just playing the game for fun, seeing if they can't get involved in the game. It's really quite complex. There's a lot of historical vocabulary, a lot of maps, a lot of terminology. They start to think about the model as a simulation of history that they can think with. So they start thinking about how does technology and geography influence the way civilizations grow and fade. From there, we find they usually start producing their own games, and all of them now that we work with have gone to straight A's in social studies and other areas. And these are 10, 11-year-old kids. If you look at one of the biggest crises right now in schools, it's underachieving boys who become labeled ADHD, and then they're starting all these social problems, fighting, and so on. And teachers are really running into, what do we do with these kids? And we think games is a really powerful way to tap into their interests and channel it towards something that's more positive. The kids certainly love it.
Hey again, my name is This, and I'm here to talk about these. This here is my new buddy James, here to help me present today's topic, learning. Wait, just wait. I see you're thinking about leaving, just hang on. It'll be good, alright? James, cover the exit. So, right, video games and learning. I know most of us don't sit in front of our games every night to learn things, but games have more potential as teaching tools than most people realize, and they don't even have to be boring games to do it. Study after study has shown that people assimilate information better when they study topics they're interested in, rather than things they're forced to learn for school or work. You know what I mean. You can't remember the names of all 50 states half the time, but you can draw a map of Middle-earth from memory? Don't be ashamed of it, it's how we are. If we're interested in something, we'll have an easy time learning it. The problem with the educational approach is that it tries to jazz up a topic we just don't care about, rather than trying to get us engaged in the topic and care about it in a personal way. But video games have a huge advantage here. We inherently care about what we're doing when we play games. The enthusiasm's already there, and the game designer just has to channel it. This brings us to my main topic of tangential learning. Tangential learning is not what you learn by being taught. Rather, it's what you learn by being exposed to things in a context which you're already engaged in. For example, consider, say, the movie 300. Clearly, not a film intended to educate, right? Yet just about everyone you know now knows who Leonidas is. The film didn't educate, but it got people interested and it stirred discussion. People were exposed to something they didn't know they were interested in, which is one of the biggest breakthroughs for learning. Some people Googled 300 and ended up at the Wikipedia page for the historical Battle of Thermopylae. Others simply thought, hey, Leonidas seems pretty awesome, I'd like to learn more about him, and you get the idea. This is what tangential learning is all about. It's the idea that some portion of your audience will self-educate if you can introduce them to topics in a context they already find exciting and engaging.
People like game designer and professor Katie Salen are helping us reimagine learning spaces. Salen's new school in New York City, Quest to Learn, is based on curriculum designed to engage students in their own learning.
In the game world, there's this phrase that's called putting chocolate on top of broccoli. And so people talk about what we really need is the fun of games put on top of the content of schools. And Katie's blown that apart and said, no, that's really not what we need. We need to completely reconceptualize what teaching and learning looks like. And she's done that through reimagining teaching and learning from the perspective of game design, and is really leading at the forefront of really reimagining what kids' experiences ought to be when it comes to learning.
We have to accept as educators that technology is not really a choice. It has created a world. It's just not here to help you teach traditional subjects. It has invented, or has emerged a completely new environment.
It's about relationship, it's about community, it's about connectivity, it's about access.
Children are living now in a different space. They're living in what I call nearly now. And nearly now is that space that they text in, that space that they update their Facebook entries in, the space that they Twitter in, the space that is not quite synchronous. Now, it's a really interesting space because it's not adversarial, it's not pressured. It's a space where people can, it's all the R words, they can reflect and retract and research and repeat. It's a very gentle word. I'll tell you what, it's a great world for learning.
If I could remodel a classroom of today, I'm not sure it would be a bricks and mortar classroom.
So the student is at the center, and school is just one of the ways and places that they learn. But they also learn through communities, at home, in museums, in libraries, and of course, online.
No doubt by now you've heard something about virtual worlds, whether it's World of Warcraft, Star Wars Galaxies, or Second Life. In some cases, virtual worlds are games where people coordinate, collaborate, and strategize in order to perform a task. In other instances, virtual worlds are shared virtual environments where people socialize, work, learn, and of course, dance.
Enter Second Life, where learners become immersed in their own education. Second Life is a 3D virtual world that can provide and deliver a unique educational setting. It's easy for them to suspend their sense of disbelief and feel immersed in their environment. This makes Second Life an ideal tool to practice role-playing as an instructional tool. Or they might learn to identify works of art by locating particular pieces in a gallery. Wouldn't it be great if instructors could take their students on guided tours of the fascinating places they are studying in their real-world classrooms? With Second Life, students can tour replicas of locations they would otherwise never visit. The Sistine Chapel, or the inside of a Dell computer. Take a walk inside a Van Gogh painting. Second Life users can experience these sensations. Second Life is being adopted as a platform by more and more institutions of learning, and developers of related educational applications have taken notice.
This leads us to a new vision of learning that's based on several core principles. The first principle is the shift from education to learning. The shift from consumption of information, again, is something that often happens in schools, to participation in production, which we think is the core form of learning that has to be at the center of 21st century learning. The shift from thinking about institutions to thinking about networks. So we know that this isn't just about the technology, that this is about learning, and that kids are learning in ways that are self-directed. They're learning in ways that involve both peers and adults, and they're learning in ways that engage their passions and their interests, as well as enable them to develop skills and competencies that allow them both to participate in democratic society, that enable them to get jobs for the future, and most importantly, to be lifelong learners.
And so, that's the cool thing about technology. It's just you can change things whenever you want.
When you have access to everything, you sort of learn how to know yourself better because you are forced to decide what to use and what to not use.
I'd say technology does make you a better learner. I mean, when you're working with technology, you have to sit and figure out, okay, this is what I had to work with, these are my resources, and this is what I need for a final product. How can I make this work? And it teaches people to think in a different way.
We have technologies that can help kids learn in new ways, and we can essentially build models of what an education for the future might look like. And my hope in doing that is that parents and teachers and school board members and kids and politicians and all of us will look at what happens in these environments and say, wow, why can't school be more like that?
They will be doing work that calls on their artistic abilities, that calls on their abilities of synthesis, that calls on their abilities of understanding the context, that calls on their abilities of working in teams, that calls on their abilities in some sense to be multidisciplinary, multilingual, multicultural.
So the coin of the realm is not memorizing the facts that they're going to need to know for the rest of their lives. The coin of the realm will be, do you know how to find information? Do you know how to validate it? Do you know how to synthesize it? Do you know how to leverage it? Do you know how to communicate it? Do you know how to collaborate with it? Do you know how to problem solve with it? That's the new 21st century set of literacies, and it looks a lot different than the model that most of us were raised under.
Now we're looking at a whole different range of schools. We're looking at schools that produce ingenious, collaborative, gregarious, brave children who care about stuff like their culture. And to build schools that do that is a whole another challenge. And around the world, people are testing out the ingredients of what makes that work. And those ingredients are being assembled into some just stunning recipes in different places. It's a very exciting time for learning. It's the death of education, but it's the dawn of learning. That makes me very happy.